600,000 were executed, 1.3 million sentenced. Millions were exiled to the cold Arctic Circle. How terrible was the Soviet purge? December 20th, 1917. In the cold, Moscow carry full of quick kill. Inside the Mulin Palace, a company named Full Expedited Return to Special Bodies of the Commission, formally established. And he is the famous Cheka. It is also the predecessor of the Ministry of Internal Affairs Kegbo. During the Lenin period, the Cheka executed nearly 13,000 enemies. Although this number appears to be relatively large, and there are a small number of them, but in general, it also greatly consolidated the fledgling Soviet regime. However, under Stalin, the Cheka was renamed the General Administration of National Security under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Result: institutions that originally existed to safeguard national security transformed, a tool for Stalin's quick return. Ultimately, it produced the most famous in history. Surprise compared to the Great Purge period. The number of executions by the Ministry of Internal Affairs, according to official statistics, nearly 13,000 people were executed. It can be called a small house. It's just a rough statistic. Great Cleaning period. About 700,000 were secretly executed. At least 600,000. As for the number of people sentenced, that's more. Plus, the number of people executed. At least 1.3 million were betrayed. Except for being executed, they're either going to be put in a high-security prison, no day to come, or locked up for 10 or even decades. After coming out, he was completely disconnected from society. And that's just on the surface. In addition, there are millions of people from all walks of life exiled to distant and cold Siberia, although they were not sentenced. But it's almost like being dead. On the way to Siberia, because the infrastructure is not perfect, harsh climate and terrain, there was no time, no preparation. Officials are crude, violence and other reasons. At least 250,000 people died. And these were executed, the so-called criminals sentenced to exile. It's mostly urban. Directly led to the sharp decline of the newly rising cities. It's the epitome of deurbanization. And that's why, the Great Purge of this history, it has become one of the research hotspots in the historical community. People want to figure it out. Why did Stalin launch this? A great awakening that seems to be of no benefit to the country. About Stalin, the relationship between the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Great Purge, historians have argued for a long time. After all, as long as there is sufficient historical data, always infer what happened. Large amount of data, and the purge was no exception. But there's only one problem. Historians are confused. That was the Great Purge launched by Stalin. Is it right or wrong? Or another way to ask, Stalin launched this Great Purge. What were the consequences? For this question, no matter the specialized historian, you're just a history buff. Ultimately, they were divided into two factions. Some people believe that the Great Purge of the Soviet Union even brought serious bad effects. Some people think that the Great Purge made the Soviet Union more stable. It has more positive than negative effects on humanity. Of course, whichever view you hold, we all need to figure out why and what. These two basic premises. And what exactly is the Great Cleaning? Why did Stalin launch the Great Purge? Trying to figure out what happened, we have to go back to December 1934. At that time, a senior Soviet official, Stalin's resolute congestion, assassinated by an assassin. And that became the trigger for the purge. 600,000 were executed. Millions were exiled. What was the true purpose of the Soviet Union's Great Purge? On the evening of December 1st, 1934, Kirov, member of the political bureau of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, yearning often walked into the office. This is Leningrad. That's where the administration of St. Petersburg is located. As a personal friend of Stalin, Kirov is usually very respected. At the same time, its security is also the tightest. Carefully selected security personnel by the organization. All-weather personal protection. Make sure no one can hurt a single hair. However, I don't know what happened today. The captain of the guard, Borisov, fell far behind. Didn't follow. And here's what's even stranger. Nikolaev was also let in. Even with a pistol. This person has clashed with guards over multiple petitions. They've always been considered dangerous. The result is a combination of factors. Kirov was assassinated on the spot by Nikolaev. The whole country was shocked for a while. After Stalin found out, rushed to Leningrad overnight to hear the case in person. And prepare for arraignment. The captain of the guard who witnessed the whole process, Borisov. At the same time, and then something even stranger happened. Borisov was on his way to court. I was in a car accident. He was beaten to death with sticks on the spot. The medical examiner later determined that the person had died in a car accident. Two cases where various factors are superimposed. Finally made Stalin feel incomparable to Peking opera. He had to wonder. Someone inside Sugun wants to plot to overthrow him. Therefore, he decided to launch a radical anti-speed movement. And this is the famous big surprise. Of course, the Kirov incident was just the trigger, causing a major cleaning. There is a deeper reason. The root of this lies in Stalin's own paranoia. And within Sugun, there is indeed voices against Stalin. January 1934, the 17th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union was held, according to the official historical data of the Soviet Union. At that time, the 17th National Congress of the Communist Party of China was held very smoothly. Stalin was widely welcomed at the conference. However, the actual situation is not so. Stalin was widely criticized during the conference. It received as many as 270 votes against. Corresponds to it. Kirov, who was assassinated in front, but only received 3 votes against. His speech, it also attracted a warm welcome from those present. And not only that, there is a saying that at the secret voting meeting, Stalin was not elected at all. Finally, when there are not enough people to further co-opt, he was elected to the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And look at the root of it. Or is it Stalin? A very serious mistake was made earlier. It was a major economic crisis. European food prices plunged. He ordered the Soviet Union to export large quantities of grain to Europe. The intention of this order is good. In exchange for Western funding to develop domestic industries, but industrial and agricultural scissors and forks, it will definitely seriously affect the livelihood of farmers. Ultimately led to the impact, the profound Ukrainian famine. Nearly 10 million people starved to death. And that's why Stalin was met with strong opposition from within Sugun. More people choose to support the relatively moderate Kirov. Some even expect the same. The esteemed Trotsky, back to the Soviet Union, replaced Stalin. That's all. The Kirov incident is either a coincidence or a conspiracy. Stalin finally decided. Launch an unprecedented rapid reaction movement. And this is what we know as the Great Purge. Up to 600,000 were executed. Millions were exiled. The Great Purge of the Soviet Union. How much disaster did it bring to this country? The reason why Stalin initiated the Great King punishment, it was originally to track down the Kirov case. Clean up the enemies within Sugun. Like Germany. Japanese spies in the Soviet Union. Later, under the auspices of Russo-Japanese, it gradually evolved into a mass extermination of the opposition. However, Russo-Japanese, the tycoon of the Ministry of Internal Affairs under Stalin, but expanded the movement. Directly caused the clear movement sweeping the country. As for who the so-called opposition is, of course, those who opposed Stalin, including but not limited to the father of the Soviet Red Army, shedding stimulus and its followers, other Soviet executives and Lenin's will, etc. In 3 unprecedented Moscow trials, Russo-Japanese, the leading Ministry of Internal Affairs, has audited a large number of senior executives. Not only were the upper echelons of Lenin's will purged, the military was seriously affected. According to statistics, the first 5 marshals awarded in the Soviet Army at that time, 3 were shot by the Ministry of the Interior, 15 army commanders, 13 people were executed by the Ministry of Internal Affairs, even at the top. The number of middle and low level is even more imaginable. One of the most representative, it's Marshal Tukhachevsky. He graduated from the Alexandria Military Academy. Later, he led the army to evaluate the Kaliningrad sailors, rebellion and Antonov-Fibin rebellion. They're genius strategists, military theorist. He not only presided over the establishment of the Red Army Military Academy, make it famous all over the world in the future. Military Academy. He also put forward the famous theory of large depth strategy. Advocate that the Soviet Army develop its own armored troops. You know, the military concepts of the world's major powers at that time, basically still in the heavy artillery stage. As long as the caliber of the artillery is large enough, the firepower is strong enough, can determine the victory or defeat of the war. And then the development of World War II undoubtedly proved how correct is Tukhachevsky. On the one hand, it is proactive, advocate for the development of the Soviet Army, armored units, mainly T-34. On the other hand, big jump strategy. It also became the main operating philosophy of the Soviet Army. It laid the foundation for the Soviet Union's victory in World War II. However, it is such a person with the reputation of Red Napoleon. At the age of 42, it was a disaster. The Marshal's military genius did not die on the battlefield. In the end, he died at the hands of his own people. Tukhachevsky case. It was later regarded as the greatest injustice in the Great Purge. Use this as an entry point. The purge directly caused the Soviet Army to fail. Indirectly led to the suffering of the Soviet Army in the Soviet-Finnish War. Defeat. This is just a big purge. Negative impact on the military. There are other areas as well. Industry. It was also more or less affected by the purge, because a large number of cadres were executed, and even the national economy came to a standstill. Chaos. Of course, as mentioned before, Stalin's Great Purge. We should all look at it dialectically. The incident did have serious negative repercussions, but it also further stabilized the domestic situation in the Soviet Union. But overall, it will outweigh the benefits.